Okay, hello everyone. Welcome again to another live stream here on SBTV, our weekly live stream. Today we're going to have Nick Giambruno. He's going to be joining us. Nick is from the Financial Underground, and he always has some pretty interesting things to say. So we're going to be taking a look at it. Let me know if audio is coming in okay for you. Joseph S, how you doing? Neil's World, buy silver and platinum. Yeah, I saw the platinum price that it's pretty enticing. I think it was what 900 or something, somewhere around there. Again, Carrie Ellen Wilder, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. Hope things are okay. Yes, our economy is being driven over a cliff. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? I mean, we kind of known this or felt this for a while, and then you actually had Elizabeth Warren come out and say it. So we'll touch on those things with Nick, who is standing by. He'll be joining us. Bill Wood, how you doing? Mr. Nguyen, how you doing? Let's see, Harold B. Rod, how you doing? Harold, thank you. 5-5. Okay, so I'll be with you guys shortly. I just want to get a few notes together. Appreciate you being here. And again, if you have questions or comments for Nick, feel free to go ahead and throw it in the live stream, and we'll see if we can pull it in. I think you guys will enjoy Nick. He's one of the bright guys out there, and he absolutely knows what's going on and puts together a great publication at the Financial Underground. So I'll see you guys in about 20 seconds or so. Let me get a few more sips of coffee in there, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hang in there. So again, hello everyone. Thank you for joining me on this live stream. In fact, joining me and Nick Giambruno from the Financial Underground. This live stream is going to be different. We're just going to have a live interview with Nick. So as mentioned, go ahead and feel free to put in your comments and questions, and we'll see if we can go ahead and get them in there with Nick. A little bit of a background. Nick Giambruno is a renowned speculator, international investor, and founder of the Financial Underground and editor in chief of its premium investment research publication, Contra Speculator. And Nick travels the world searching for lucrative investment opportunities in overlooked markets. And he specializes in identifying big picture geopolitical and economic trends ahead of the crowd and finding smart speculations within those trends. And he's a frequent speaker at investment conferences around the world. So with that, we'll go ahead and bring Nick Giambruno on board. Nick, welcome to SBTV live stream. How you doing?
Hey, Patrick, great to be with you.
Great, glad to have you on. First question here, that website, financialunderground.com. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, sure. Well, it's a website that I founded to help people see the true big picture in finance and geopolitics because getting the big picture right is so important. And a lot of people get stuck in the details and confused by the media narratives. So I'm looking at what is really going on in finance and geopolitics, debunking these mainstream narratives and finding ways to invest at the same time.
Okay, sounds like a lot of us here. Nick, the last time we spoke back in March of this year, we touched on the Saudi China oil deal, and that was had a lot of concerns with it. And recently, Qatar has come out and said to Europe something along the lines of buy our natural gas for the next 30 years, or we may sell it to Asia. Nick, are we going to see more geopolitical jostling as real things like commodities and energy have their value increase?
Oh, certainly, and seeing this this deal being negotiated, it gives you a glimpse of the bargaining strength that a country like Qatar, and Qatar is the number one producer of natural gas in the world, so they're a huge producer of natural gas, and a 30-year deal. This is a huge thing. Imagine any business securing a 30-year guaranteed business contract. I mean, so yes, they're in a very powerful position to negotiate with the Europeans because the Europeans have done some incredibly stupid and self-destructive things. They've tried to go onto this phony green economy, which thinks they can run their advanced industrial economies on windmills and solar panels, which is frankly ridiculous. So anybody who spends any time looking into it, it looks nice on paper, it sounds nice and warm and fuzzy, but you just can't run an industrialized society on solar panels and windmills. And at the same time, they're antagonizing and in a feud with Russia. So what are they going to do? That's why the Qataris are looking at this and seeing the Europeans in this situation that, frankly, they created for themselves and are driving a hard bargain.
Okay, Rick, Nick, you mentioned Russia. Interesting news just came out as well, where the G7 is looking to ban gold from Russia. What's your take on this one?
Oh, this is just an act of desperation. Ban gold from Russia. These G7 countries, the U.S. and the EU. I mean, they're not really. I mean, the Europeans just follow the Americans, the EU largely. They just follow the Americans. So it's not as if it's like some kind of independent entity that's making independent decisions that are in the best interest of their people. They're not. They're just following what the US says, pretty much. Anyways, to ban Russian gold. And they're treating Russia as if it's this like small country that they can kick around like it's Libya or Iraq or Syria or one of these countries that they're just used to kind of shoving around. I mean, Russia is a commodity superpower. It's not just an oil and gas superpower. Everybody knows about that, but they dominate a lot of commodities. So this is going to be going to for sure boomerang. It already is. I mean, you can already see this with what's going on with the price increases in energy and so forth. But this is going to boomerang back at these fools, frankly. And is it going to hurt Russia? No, they're just going to sell their gold to somebody else, or use intermediaries. If they really want to sell to the Europeans, maybe they'll sell to the Turks, and then the Turks will sell to the Europeans. You know what this is going to do? It's going to make profits for a middleman. I mean, so it's completely stupid and misguided.
Okay, some great points there. Nick, also something that came out was we saw Jerome Powell. He had a testimony, and he got grilled. He did get grilled by a few lawmakers there, but inflation still seems to be that rising topic. Has the Fed truly painted itself in a corner where if it raises rates, people may find themselves out of a job in the name of price stability, a Fed mandate? In other words, the Fed is kind of saying, we'll stop the prices from rising. We'll go ahead and try and do something with this inflation, but you may find yourself you may find yourself out of work. And if it brings on a recession, it's okay because then we can lower rates to feed the beast again. Am I interpreting what the Fed is doing wrong?
No, I think you've got it right, but I think you don't go far enough. First, let me just say that isn't it weird? Like, take a step back. What do we have here? We have a committee of central planners planning the interest rate, and the interest rate is not an insignificant thing. Interest rates are the price of borrowing money. It's the price of money. It's like the most important price in all of capitalism. And what do you have? You have a Politburo of central planners that get together and try to price fix interest rates. It's completely absurd. They don't know what the right rate of interest is. You don't know what it is. I don't know. No human being knows what the interest rate should be. It's impossible. It's an impossible task. You should let that be determined by the market of borrowers and savers. So it's completely absurd that you have this group of people doing this in the first place. Nobody should be setting interest rates. And anybody who would look at any other price, if somebody tried to set the price, they always make fun of communist countries. They set the price of every shoes. They set the price of everything. But oddly, the price of money, nobody bats an eyelash over that. So this is a completely absurd situation. Be that as it may, yes, they have painted themselves into a corner. Let me explain. They can't raise interest rates very much because the debt level is so high, and they've gotten to a point where, okay, so let's look at what are they trying to do? They're trying to like fight inflation, and even according to their own crooked numbers, because all governments lie about inflation, and the US says according to its numbers it's like 8.5%. and they are raising rates. What's it at 1.75 right now? That's not going to do a damn thing compared to 8.5% inflation. And that's just the official numbers. The real number of inflation is much worse because the CPI is crooked for so many reasons. That I'll set that aside because I don't want to go off on a different topic. However, what is the real rate of inflation? You don't have to measure a basket of goods and like that are cherry picked by the government. This is just a completely useless and manipulated statistic. So I would throw the CPI in the garbage. One of the real measure of inflation is a change in the money supply. That's what you really want to look at. Now, since the outbreak of this COVID hysteria that has swept the world in March of 2020, the US money supply has gone up by 41%. That's the real inflation number. So you want to look at what the inflation rate is. This is not an annual rate, but this is going back to March of 2020. The money supply has increased by 41%. That is a much more descriptive and accurate measure of what is going on here. So with them fiddling around with 75 basis point rate hikes is not going to make a damn worth of a difference in this situation. Now, let's say they really did want to fight inflation and bring interest rates high like they did, in the 1980s with Paul Volcker. They can't even get anywhere near that because let's assume they raise rates. The U.S. government has about $30 trillion worth of debt, almost 31 trillion. If they raise rates anywhere near to what they have to do to fight inflation, the interest expense the federal government will pay will be take up all of the tax receipts, essentially all the horrible taxation that the US government inflicts on people and corporations. All of that money will go to just pay the interest expense. Forget about the Defense Department, forget about Social Security, forget about it'll be going to pay the interest expense. That's what's called bankruptcy. So this is why they're trapped, because they have out of control inflation and they can't raise rates enough to fight that inflation without triggering a bankruptcy. That is called game over. So I don't know what is going to happen. This is why they're talking about the reset, because they have no choice. They have painted themselves into a corner. I liken it to like when a spoiled child is playing a board game and he's losing at the board game. What does the spoiled child do? Rather than admit he loses, he flips the board over and resets the game. Essentially, this is what's going to happen. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, but now that we know that they're trapped, they're going to do something along these lines.
Okay, hey, Nick, got a comment that came in from a viewer, Rod. He's saying inflation is probably near 15%. You kind of feel it's about that as well?
Well, annually, yes, it could. I mean, if you're looking over a year-over-year measure, what I was talking about at the 41%, that's starting at March of 2020.
Mm,
So that's how much the money supply has increased since March of 2020. And I think that's a much more descriptive measure than looking at consumption price consumption baskets and these kinds of things. So yes, when we're talking about inflation, we have to be very specific what we're talking about. Are we talking about the government's measure, which is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or are we talking about the increase in the money supply, which is the classic and correct definition of inflation? So I
mhm.
prefer to use that because it's much more accurate. It accurately describes what's going on. The CPI, nobody should use the CPI. This is propaganda. Throw the CPI in the garbage and just laugh at people who take this thing seriously. It's a government statistic that is completely manipulated, and they cherry pick what goes into the basket and to get the result that they want. And even with that, it's showing bad inflation. So you can assume it's
Yeah.
much worse.
All right. And again, at that recent testimony Jerome Powell had upon the Hill, Elizabeth Warren made this comment. She said, "You know what's worse than high inflation and low unemployment is high inflation and a recession with millions of people out of work. And I hope you'll reconsider that before you drive the economy off a cliff." So, this is what she told Powell, that she hopes he reconsiders some things before he drives the economy off a cliff. Nick, what's your take on this? Do you feel the Fed is also driving the economy off a cliff? And I mean, but really, why would our central bank do this?
Well, first, nobody should be taking advice of any kind from Elizabeth Warren. She's uniformly terrible on everything. To get to the point of what she was saying, goes back to what I was saying. Why is there this institution that has so much control over the economy of a supposedly free market? Why does this group of, the 12 people, I think, on the FOMC, why are they so powerful? Is this a free market, or is this some kind of like pseudo communist system that's going on here? So it's completely absurd. But yes, it is true that this person, the Fed and Jerome Powell, have a lot of power because they are the money printers. They control money, and money is half of every transaction in the economy. They own and control all of that. So they're very powerful. And yes, they are driving it off a cliff. These people are clowns. Why do they have any credibility? Anybody who's been paying attention for just the past couple of years and listening to these fools talk about transitory inflation, oh, there's no inflation, oh, inflation, oh, there is inflation, but it's actually good for us. These people should have no credibility. They've completely lost their credibility, and they deserve contempt as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, got another comment that came in. Let me throw this up there. Mr. Nguyen says Arizona green tea in gallon size was 258 6 months ago. I bought it at 298 3 weeks ago. Yesterday the price is 348. Nick, if you don't mind, where are you located, and do you see inflation rising there as well?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in South America and Argentina and other countries, and yes, I see inflation all the time. Argentina has terrible inflation. That's no secret. So I have it's been a great learning experience to see how people deal with it. The thing is, what's different is that the people in Argentina and other parts of Latin America, they are. It's not painful. It is painful. Inflation is painful anywhere. However, they know, they're accustomed to it, and they know how to deal with it in the best way. Americans don't. They're this is a new thing for them, and they're going to be completely blindsided. It's like getting the rug pulled from underneath them. So it's kind of sad, but they really should. Americans should immediately take a hard look at the history of Argentina and see what has gone on there, because it's going to happen in the U.S. very soon.
Yeah, that's interesting because with Argentina, they've had a few bouts with the IMF and their own debt as well, right? You kind of seen something like this coming down the road with the US?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Argentina, they've had a few bouts with the IMF as far as not being able to repay their debt. Do you see something like this coming down with the US?
Well, like what I just mentioned, yes. How can they, if they're at the point where interest expense consumes all of the tax revenue, and they have no money left over for anything, that's game over. And that's what they have to do if they really want to tackle inflation. So it's really game over at this point. It just hasn't been officially acknowledged. But anybody
Yeah.
who's looking at what the facts, looking at the facts of the situation, that is it. They are bankrupt because if they really want to fight inflation, there's going to be they will go bankrupt. There's just going to be no money left over for anything else because of the interest expense. So at that point, they're and countries, when this happens, this is when they reach this point. This is what always happens in whether it's Argentina, Venezuela, Lebanon, any other Zimbabwe, any other country that gets to that game over point. What happens? The currency is going to lose a ton of value. So the folks who are noticing the increase in the grocery store prices, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is just the beginning. And you people have to learn how to manage this. This is not an easy thing to do. It's very painful. It's very sad because people's life savings are going to get wiped out who don't really understand what's happening. So yeah, it's going to be tough, and time is short. Look at the hard money people have been warning about this situation for many years, many decades,
Yeah.
frankly. However, why is it urgent now? It's urgent now because now they weren't really forced to raise interest rates before. But now when you have inflation like this high, even according to their crooked statistics, they have to try to at least. And they're in between a rock and a hard place, and that didn't exist. Those conditions didn't exist in the past, and now that is what really makes it urgent, because they're going to be doing some desperate things, and I promise it's not going to be good for people holding U.S. dollars.
Yeah, amen. Completely agree with all of that. Just need to shout out to Richard Martin. Aloha. How are you doing? Nick, Senator John Kennedy, and I heard you use the word power in a few of your statements there. But Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, at the same testimony, said this to Powell. He said, "We got a hell of a mess right now, and you're the most powerful man in the United States, maybe in the world." It kind of shocked me that he would go so far as to say the most powerful man in the US, maybe even in the entire world. Nick, when Kennedy tells Powell, "You are the most powerful man in the US," is it true? And what does that mean about a sitting US president or perhaps any other world leader? I mean, just to go so far as to say with that slip, does that really say that central bankers are probably indeed the rulers of the world?
Yes, I think that is the case. Central bankers are the powers that are in charge here, and so that's a rabbit hole that if people want to go down, they certainly should if they want to learn more about who is really running the show here. And so yes, the Federal Reserve is the most powerful central bank in the entire world because they get to create. The world's reserve currency out of nothing with no effort. um, it's that is an unbelievable power. However, it's not a situation that can last forever, and it's fleeting. It's fleeting because you can't you can't just force the world to accept something of no value forever without consequences. So I think it's the U.S. dollar, the fiat system is over since it was created, or it was born rather. I'm sorry, in 1971. It's well over 50 years old now, and it's getting it's at the end of its shelf life, like a carton of rotten milk. So I don't think this is going to last longer. But yes, the central banks are very powerful, and don't take my word for it. Jerome Powell just said a few weeks ago that there could be, quote, more than one world reserve currency. So
Yeah.
even these guys understand that this system is at the end of its line. And that's why they're all talking about great reset, resetting the system, and using language like this. They realize the system that they run is running out of runway. So they are looking to bridge the gap to a new system. And that's what I see going on here.
Yeah, completely agree there. And that new system, right on time, Dick. Appreciate that. That new system, it looks to be central bank digital currencies that are coming our way. Can you give us your take on what CBDCs will mean and what these central bank digital currencies may look like?
Yeah, well, this is what they want. This is, in my view, in my estimation, what these guys want during this reset. What do they want to change? What do they want? What do they want the new system to look like? And yes, CBDCs are a big part of it. I think they would rather have the IMF's SDR as the world's reserve currency instead of the U.S. dollar. And those two things in combination is what they're really going to push for when there's another crisis, because these guys always push through their agenda in the time of crisis, because that's when they can get away with stuff they couldn't get away with in normal times. So yes, CBDCs are a big part of it. However, this is not a viable system, and it's very easy to see. Would a CBDC have saved the Venezuelan bolivar? Would the CBDC have saved the Lebanese lira? Would a CBDC have saved the Argentine peso? No, the answer is no to all of those. So fundamentally, yes, maybe it will give a little more breathing room for the dollar and some other major currencies, but it doesn't alter the fundamental equation that they are just shuffling around digital representations of nothing. So yes, they'll try it, but I don't think it will work for the same reason. It's the same fiat system with a different, it's like old wine in new bottles. So it's the same fiat system with a new spin on it, and it's no more viable than the current fiat system. So that's the bright side, that what they really want to impose is also not going to work either.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree with you there. Nick, though many people I do talk to off camera tell me it's not just CBDCs that we need to watch, but also the carbon credits that we keep hearing about, that these may eventually become some sort of a currency as we move forward. What's your take on these carbon credits and the possibility of them becoming a type of a currency?
Oh, absolutely. They are. That is definitely in the cards too, and part of this whole agenda. So, carbon credits are a completely fake thing, invented by bureaucrats to extract wealth and to transfer wealth from everyday people to the politically connected. It's a scam, in other words. Carbon credits are horrible. I'm actually more concerned about carbon credits than I am about CBDCs, because
Mm.
this is a new thing. A carbon credit is a completely new thing, but it's really a way. It's very similar to fiat currency. Governments can create carbon credits out of thin air, and they can force people to use it through regulation. So it's very similar to a fiat currency. And you got to think, put yourself in the shoes of these central bankers. Imagine, you were in the business of central banking, which is not an honorable business, by the way. And what it basically is you're looking to extract value from human beings without them knowing it, and it's a scam basically. So they're trying it. I view the carbon credits as a new incarnation of the fiat system, and then people are going to feel good about it. They're going to try to propagandize people into saying, oh, you're doing your part to save the planet, save the earth. But it's all a bunch of BS. And people should be very wary of these carbon credits, and actually should fight back against them, because this is a tool to enslave people, and whether they realize it or not, it's something that should be resisted.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of paint a picture here. How does it work? I mean, every person gets so much credits every month or whatever it is, and we can go ahead and buy, let's say, meat, or we can go ahead and fuel up the vehicle. But we have a limit of how much we can actually purchase as far as maybe fuel or certain types of food. I mean, is this how it's going to work? Where we basically we just have a limited amount of credits?
Well, think of it like this, and nobody knows how it's going to work, but this is how it probably is going to work. The government will assign you an allowance of how much carbon you are allowed to consume, not just you as individuals, but companies and corporations too. So let's say you have like 100 or I don't know, 10, whatever carbon credits per month, and they have some kind of accounting system for like using those carbon credits. Well, if you want to use more, like let's say you want to, go above your carbon allowance, well, you're going to have to buy a carbon credit from somebody else, or buy it from the government, which creates them out of thin air. So it's going to look something like this, and it's dangerous because it's going to regulate carbon that touches every human activity basically. So it's completely absurd that they're trying to regulate carbon and introduce this like carbon accounting and carbon system where they can tax and regulate. So it's going to look something like this.
Okay. Nick, you posted on Twitter that every recent rate hiking cycle has seen lower highs, and let's see if they can get past 2.5% peak of the last cycle before they go back to massive money printing. And on the left side of this graph, in let's see, in the sorry, in blue we have the federal debt, the total public debt. In red we had the federal funds effective rate. Can you go over this graph, and what is it that you were trying to express when you tweeted this?
Yes, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. This illustrates perfectly what I was saying, at that it's game over for the US government. And this is why it's urgent. So look at the chart. You can see as the debt rises that it's harder for them to raise interest rates, which is natural, because if you have more debt, higher interest rates makes that more painful. And every rate, you can see the rate hiking cycles, say since they peaked in the 1980s, every rate hike cycle rate hiking cycle, excuse me, since that peak in the 1980s has been lower highs, in other words, every time it is lower. And why? It's because the debt is going up. And if you look at the most recent rate hiking cycle, they couldn't get above 2.5%.
Right.
And are they going to get above 2.5%? What, with inflation at 8.5%? They certainly have to try to get above 2.5%, but I don't know if they're going to be able to. So what this chart shows is the end game that I was saying, because now the debt is so high, it's so extreme that they can't even tolerate a token increase in interest rates. Remember, the long-term average interest rate on the 10-year treasury, which is the rate the US government has to pay roughly, is 5.6%. That's the long-term average. They couldn't go to 5.6%. So this is that chart illustrates how they're trapped. And what does that mean? What does a government do when it's trapped? It has a reset. So that's why we have to be prepared for this. This is going to come sooner than most people think. That chart is it shows the urgency of the situation.
Yeah, Nick, that's a great point because when you say a government when they're trapped, what they do is they bring up a reset. It kind of reminds me of what we saw back with Weimar Germany, where their money, their currency inflated, and they brought in a new currency, and then they brought in a currency again right after that. So is this kind of the playbook that central banks or our governments kind of use, where they will just create a new currency, as we're kind of hearing with CBDCs, and continue on, game on as usual?
Yeah, they'll try to do that, but it's going to be highly inflationary. One thing about CBDCs that I forgot to mention that's very important is that they're not only just an extension of the current fiat system. It's actually worse. Do you think it'll be much easier for governments to create currency with the CBDC? What does that mean? This is going to be more inflation. They're inflationary. CBDCs are a way to create more inflation. Central banks are in the business of creating inflation and reaping the profit that comes from creating inflation. It's called seigniorage. And CBDCs are going to make it much easier for governments to extract seigniorage out of its population. And you can add carbon credits on there too, which is just another way to extract seigniorage from folks, because they control the carbon credits. They can create them out of thin air and force people to use them just like fiat money. But ultimately, these gimmicks are not viable. These are not like a long-term solution. So there's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of chaos in the currency markets because of these attempts to do these ridiculous solutions.
Okay, got another comment that came in. I think this one might kind of light a fire here, but so what happens to the old currency? I guess what happens to what happens to the dollar?
Well, nothing good. You're not going to gain. I'll tell you, you're not going to gain purchasing power. I'll tell you that. How much are you going to lose? Is the question. Probably most of it. And when these resets happen, you'll have the banks will probably what will happen is the banks will shut down, or there'll be some kind of emergency, and then they'll be closed for a few days, and then they'll reopen, and instead of having dollars, you might have CBDC tokens instead. It's probably
Yeah.
something like that could happen. But no matter what you see, the thing, it's nobody knows what the exact details will be, except that it's not going to be favorable to dollar holders. So you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket and just be in a position where you're hurt in that situation. You want to have some hard assets, have alternative assets. So it's a game of who can lose the least. Nobody's going to make money in this situation. It's going to be very hard. I mean, yes, you maybe could make some money in some right areas, but people are going to be losing money hand over fist, and you just are going to want to protect yourself. Now, you could, it is very possible to make money with hard assets, but it is going to be, it's not going to be easy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Zachary has an interesting comment here. He says the problem is that all currencies are inflating, unlike Germany did, and that helps to nail the USD. And this is interesting. He has a great point here because all currencies they're inflating, and even if you look at the DXY, you see the dollar getting stronger against certain currencies, but obviously not the ruble. So, I mean, what's your take on that opinion there?
Well,
that
they're all junk. All fiat currencies are junk. I mean, think of it like this. Just because they're government like tokens, like these are no different than like when you go to the arcade and you have to buy arcade tokens to use at the arcade, except governments issue these things. So fundamentally, these things are crappy forms of money. So they're all bad. The US dollar is just the least worst. So yeah, I'm not too excited about the fact that the dollar. Okay, so yes, yeah, all the other currencies are worse, but the dollar is horrible. Look at how much inflation is and how much prices are going up in dollar terms. So if that's the best out of all the fiat currencies, I think it's time to look at different types of money.
Okay, moving on here. As noted in your website, Financial Underground, there was a time indeed when the US was debt free. Can you tell us about how then President Andrew Jackson managed to do it and if it's possible to even do today?
Well, I think this is a fascinating story that very few people talk about. Certainly, you won't hear it in the mainstream academia or the media. Is the story of how Andrew Jackson ended the Fed of his day. People don't realize the Federal Reserve is actually the third central bank of the United States. There were two incarnations of a central bank before the Federal Reserve. And Andrew Jackson was the one who heroically shut down the second central bank of the United States. Fascinating story. We don't have time to get into all of it. But not only did he shut down the central bank, the second central bank of the United States, he paid off the federal debt in. He's the only president to ever pay off the federal debt completely. Zero. There was zero federal debt. He paid it all off, and he ended the central bank. This guy is he's a fascinating character. Not only that, but he survived an assassination, miraculously survived an assassination attempt, which was on the assassin had two pistols, and both of his pistols misfired, and Jackson survived. Now that assassination attempt was almost certainly the people behind it were almost certainly the central bankers and their allies. There's very little doubt that that was the case. Anyways, that is a people should look into Andrew Jackson to the extent that he's mentioned in the mainstream press. They try to smear him as some kind of he's always nothing more than a racist. So I mean, this is completely ridiculous. So people should look into this, and it's a very fascinating story about Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, I'm looking at that article now, and it says Jackson he knew that being debt free was essential to independence, and this outlook resonated with many Americans back then. Does it resonate with people today? I mean, it seems like there is still a population that maybe doesn't quite understand what money is, what things like gold and silver do, what things like debt actually does. What do you think people still understand that being debt free is essential to independence?
No, not at all. And going back to your original question, could this happen today? Sadly, I don't think so. It's not. It's not possible. It's not possible to pay back the debt honestly because the debt's over $30 trillion, and I always use a trillion is an enormous number. I always use this to put this into context. If you made $1 per second, it would take you 11 days to make $1 million. If you made $1 per second, it would take you like 30 something years to make $1 billion. But if you wanted to make $1 trillion and you earned $1 per second, it would take you over 30,000 years to make $1 trillion. So times that by 30. That's how much the debt is. It's impossible. If you made $1 per second, it would take you over 960 thousand years to make a trillion, or to not make $1 trillion. I'm sorry, to pay off the federal debt. It's impossible to pay off the federal debt. So it's not going to happen. The only way they can do it is through inflation or some kind of reset. And in going back to the average person, no, I don't think they understand these issues, and it'll be too late before they realize their importance. Unfortunately.
Okay, some great points there. Nick, social media, excuse me, it's really become a lapdog for governments, mainstream media, even elitist organizations. They tell us inflation is good. We remember this. They tell us No more turkey for Thanksgiving. Have, I think it was soy or something like that. Housing is expensive. Move back home to your parents. They tell us meat is too expensive. Eat bugs. We all remember this. Are we living in a time, this let them eat cake era, where basically we're just getting slapped in the face over and over and over again?
Yes, I think this is the case. But what you're referring to with those examples is this. You remember the primary product of central banks is inflation. Like if they were a corporation, their product would be inflation, which is a terrible thing. So what they're doing is they're propagandizing people into their to accept inflation. It's like laundering inflation. They're trying to launder the inflation and make it acceptable for people and say, oh, eat bugs instead of eat meat. It's better for the environment. You can't afford meat. Well, have a worm burger or a soy burger. Better for the environment. So what they're doing is they're trying to launder the effects of their inflation, and that's what you're seeing.
Okay. Nick, when and I ask some of these questions because when I look around with my own eyes, and not through the eyes of the media, I do still see a very beautiful place. There's still beautiful people out there filled with hopes and dreams and aspirations to build a very bright future. Am I odd in seeing this? And am I not in reality if I still see these things? But because are we really being corporatized in some way, where, meaning in corporations there are no individuals, just teams of employees, and likewise this world is being force fed the idea that individualism is not acceptable and you must sacrifice that for the greater good. I mean, are we turning into some sort of corporate earth? I mean, many people do say that corporations ultimately will have power and control, even governance.
I may take. I think you're right. I think it's possible. We should focus on the positive because there's so much negative out there. Life is short, and to put it into perspective, the average lifetime, if you live to be about, I don't know, 80 years, you get about a little over 30,000 days on this planet. It's not a lot. 30,000 days, that goes by very
Wow.
quick. So don't waste it, and don't let these terrible people waste too much of your time. Yes, you should know what's going on, but focus on the important things in life, family, and enjoying life. Life is beautiful, so don't let these horrible people rob you of the precious days that you have on this planet. That being said, I think what the main enemy here is not necessarily the corporations. They're bad when they get in bed with government, but corporations, they can't coerce you to do anything. Nobody can a corporation can't put a gun to your head and force you to do something. A government can. But so where the corporations get go wrong is when they get in bed with governments, and that's
Yeah.
nasty. That's a terrible thing, and we see that happen. But the real villain in this situation is the government, is the politicians. So we really have to find ways to not let these people affect your life. And you can own hard assets that is resistant to their inflation and their wealth confiscation. So there are ways to deal with this, and I think so. Yeah, I think that's the primary enemy here.
Okay. Okay. Nick, knowing we are in this transition of sorts, how important is financial freedom? And what I mean by financial freedom is having financial or monetary tools or instruments like gold, like silver, that can free you from the current financial system.
Oh, they're very important because if you only think about it, if you are working, full-time job, 40 hours plus a week on that treadmill, and you're earning these scraps of confetti that the central bank creates with no effort, and then you're storing your energy, your life force in these scraps of confetti, what this allows them to do is to tap. It's basically, they're sucking the life out of you and the economic force out of you through you running on a hamster wheel for their confetti. So how do you escape this system? Well, don't store your life force in their confetti. Store it in hard assets. And what I mean by hard assets are assets that are hard to produce assets. So gold and silver is in that category. I put Bitcoin in that category too. So you don't want to put your life savings into something that somebody else can create with no effort. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, okay, completely agree with you there. The one thing I hear all the time is where the price of gold and where the price of silver is going. What's the price today? Where is it going? When are we going to see that silver slingshot? But Nick, why do people place a fiat value that loses purchasing power on stores of wealth that are real and true, sound money like gold and silver?
Yeah, well, people right now the people need fiat, and that's just the reality. You need it to pay your bills. You need it to interact, and it's unfortunate. Maybe that will change in the future, but that's why people are sensitive to the price because they need it as a practicality. However, I pay. Price is important, but I pay attention obviously to the fundamentals and the big picture. And the big picture couldn't be brighter for alternative monetary assets such as gold. And this is what I pay attention to. I don't get too concerned about daily fluctuations in the price. So I just keep my eye on the big picture and the fundamentals. And as long as that story still makes sense, I still feel comfortable with my allocations.
Okay, hang on. Let me just turn some sound off here. Sorry about that. Um, Nick, I think you're going to find that there are many like-minded people here who see your views and they find, and I do hope that they find their way to your website, financialunderground.com. So before we head out, you've given us quite a bit of time here. Really do appreciate that. But before we head out, can you tell us what you are currently working on?
Sure. Well, I'm working a lot on looking at what is going on with this upcoming monetary reset that we talked about before, why it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what people can do about it. But the bottom line is this: the U.S. government is trapped, and it's not just the U.S. government; it's most governments. All governments are trapped, and they're going to flip the board. They're going to reset the system. And what does that mean? What can people do about it? And I released a free special report that goes over a lot of these topics on the Financial Underground. You can find that. Go to the financialunderground.com and free guide, and you can get that. And I've been putting a lot of time into that, and I think folks will find a lot of useful information there.
Okay, all right, we appreciate that, Nick. Um, Hang on, let me move forward here. Uh, okay, whoops, hang on, let me clear this out. Always got a problem. It's always going to happen in the live stream for sure. Okay, so Nick, I just want to take a few questions and comments here. I'm sure there are a lot of them for you. Chris Arcadia, Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics is here. How you doing, Chris? So I just want to bring in a few questions that I saw, and if you folks also have questions, let us know here. One of them being, the West is not accustomed to severe inflation, which is why there is more risk or more risk of social unrest. And this is getting deliberately stoked by the control structure to make it worse as well. I mean, do you feel it's deliberately being done?
Yes, I do. I suspect it is. I can't prove it, and nobody can really prove it. It's mostly conjecture, but I'll tell you my reasoning for that. And it is the same reasoning that, like, say, when people demolish old buildings that are on a bad foundation, what do? They don't wait for the building to collapse. They engage in a controlled demolition so that it collapses in a controlled fashion. So I see the folks who are in charge, these central bankers, this cabal of money printers, and they see that the system that they run is like that building that is going to collapse. Now, do they want to let that building collapse in a manner that's uncontrollable and that might be chaotic? No, they would rather have a controlled demolition where they try to shape the outcome of what happens next. So that's what I see the motivation in these kinds of seemingly self-destructive actions.
Okay. Then we also have Rod who says, I think carbon credits, the carbon credit racket is the replacement to the petrodollar. A couple interesting things there. One, the petrodollar, it is kind of slipping away, fading away, but is the US, I mean, who's going to be in charge of this as the petrodollar fades and these carbon credits come about? I mean, who do you think may be in charge of it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the petrodollar was actually based on something real. It was based on oil. It was based on energy. And the oil is the world's most important commodity, energy commodity. So yes, the petrodollar was not a fake thing. It was based on something real. But yes, it is that is going away, and maybe we'll see a system where China will definitely be involved in this. They're the biggest consumer of oil, and they have a voracious appetite for oil that is not going to be quenched anytime soon. So if I had to guess, the Chinese are going to be dictating what comes after the petrodollar system. But the carbon credit thing is a poor substitute for the petrodollar system. This is a scam. And I cannot see China, India, Russia. Is the U.S. government going to force China, India, Russia, Iran, force them to do this carbon credit thing? I don't think that's going to work out very well. They can force their poor citizens to use it, but it's going to be one different thing to force other rival powers to use this obvious scam.
Okay, one more question here I'll take from Pinch Runner. BRICS, you kind of touched on them. Will BRICS be the new petrodollar or some sort of petrodollar? Will they kind of take the lead in the world's currencies?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think it very well could be. Obviously, China is part of the BRICS. Russia is part of the BRICS. They're a huge oil producer. So I think, yeah, and that is going to be that gets into the geopolitics of it, because this is also why the West is engaged. And when I say the West, I mean the U.S. and NATO and Europe. They're engaging in all of these desperate actions because they sense that the power is slipping out of their hands. They're the ones really in charge, the preeminent powers in the world. But what if the pricing power in oil moves east? It moves to China. It moves in the direction of Russia. Well, that is going to be a rug pull for the West. And frankly, they don't deserve to have the power to price oil. You can't just maintain an artificial dominant position in the market forever. So the market will ultimately decide, but that has geopolitical implications. But yes, I think the dominance in the energy markets is going to shift east. And
Yeah,
let me
okay.
add one more thing too,
Sure, sure.
especially with the West going into this insane green economy. This is a total. This goes into the carbon credits. They're based. I mean, this is they're basically handing the East, China, Russia, they're handing them on a silver platter this the preeminence in the energy markets by doing this ridiculous green economy, new green deal, all this stuff. And the Europeans are even further along with it than the Americans. So they are just it's self-inflicted to a large degree too. So can't blame the BRICS countries for stepping up and taking that opportunity.
Yeah, you brought up a kind of an interesting point there. Nick, do you think the West has given up or the West knows that the sun is setting and they're just trying to have some kind of an easier transition for them, but a rougher one for the people?
Yeah, it's tricky because when we talk about the West, who is the West? I mean, the Europeans on their own really. And I say this as a European too, because I'm an Italian, and they're not a deciding factor. Really, the U.S. is the engine of the West, and so that's going to be the big story. Is the U.S. and China? That's going to be who's going to be the preeminent power. And the U.S. it seems to be in terminal decline. So it's not looking good for. What is the West without the U.S.? The West is not going. Without the U.S., the West, NATO, the EU, it's not going to be able to like stand on its own against the rest of the world. It needs the U.S. It's the engine for this whole thing. So without the U.S., and the U.S. in my view is in terminal decline economically, socially, and all metrics basically. So it's bad news for the West.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with that as much as I don't want to. I can't be blind to what's going on as well. Nick Giambruno from the financialunderground.com. Thank you for sitting in with us and giving us your views. I do hope that people make it over to your website, and I really hope we can do this again soon.
Sounds great, Patrick. Had a great time.
Okay. Well, we'll let you go. I know it's the clock is getting a bit late on your part of the world, so I'll let you get some rest. And for everyone else, we'll continue on a bit, maybe take a look at some comments, and then I'll head on out as well. But for now, Nick John Bruno, we'll let you go. And again, thank you for being with us.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks again, Nick. Appreciate it. Okay, so that was Nick Giambruno from the Financial Underground. Had a lot of good questions from you folks. I could see, there a bit of emotion going on there with what he had to say, and rightfully so. I mean, some of these things, they sting, but they're the truth. Truth sometimes stings, sometimes might hurt a bit. But Nick, he's one of the good guys out there. He's looking out for us, so wanted to bring him back on. I'll take a look at a few comments before we head out as well. Um, let's see. Um, yeah, Zachary, we definitely would appreciate that. Click the button. Definitely would appreciate that. Again, YouTube, they have some bad days, and they take it out on us from time to time. So thumbs ups, they do help. So we really do appreciate the thumbs up. Uh, let's see what else is out there. Kathy Mello, uh, absolutely. I think that's probably one of the bigger questions. I mean, who are the real controllers? Some people say central banks. Some people say shadow governments. Some people say Klaus Schwab. It's all over the place. Who are the real controllers? We just don't know. I mean, you can't really with 100% certainty say who it is. We kind of have feelings, or we kind of think we might know who it is, and I wouldn't argue with too many of you, but I mean, I think it's safe to say it may not be the people that we're electing. They may not be the true leaders. So it's a great comment there, Kathy. Appreciate that. A couple more comments I'll take a look at, and then we'll head out. Let's see. Yeah, Lasky Land, thank you. We appreciate that. Absolutely appreciate it. Uh, Hang on, let me see something real quick as well. We did have a visitor pop in. Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics. I'm not sure if he's still here, but he popped in to say hello. So if you guys had any questions for him as well, just go ahead and leave it in the comments section. Yeah, here he is, Chris. Chris, we love your channel as well. I know you got a lot of followers who a lot of guys who follow you are here as well. So we do appreciate what you do as well. Um, we're all truthful, we're all genuine in what we do, and we just all want to bring people the truth. It's sometimes it's hard to come by. So with that, I'll just look for one more comment, and support Chris if you can as well. Let me take a look at a last comment here. Carrie Ellen Wilder. Nick was a great interview. Appreciate that. Nick does as well. A man of uncommon common sense. I think that's a great way to put it. Uncommon common sense. That's why, as I always say, we got to be that blessing. Try not to be the burden. We got to try and help people as best we can. Help yourself. Tool up. Learn trades, things like that. Uh, Learn a little bit of plumbing, electrical, whatever it is. Learn how to garden. Learn how to garden. Uh, Learn how to upgrade yourself, and do what you can. I mean, you see food getting expensive. I mean, pick up some food. Food that'll last for a while. uh it's a good investment. I mean, maybe something you're going to buy is $1.50 today. It might be $3 6 months from now, so you kind of doubled up, or you saved half anyway. So things like food, things like seeds. Seeds are also something good. And of course, silver and gold, because through it all, you have to protect your wealth. These are stores of value. You need to get through this transition, this transition we're going through from the current monetary system to whatever it is they're going to bring us, whether it's an SDR, whether it's central bank digital currencies. You're going to need something to carry fiat your fiat wealth into the next monetary system. And I look at gold and silver for that. Not financial advice. I'm just saying what I do, because as far as looking at things like gold and silver, it's going to hold a value. far greater than fiat would, especially when things really start to take a tumble. So do the things you need to do. Protect yourself. Be a blessing, not a burden. And as I always say, saddle up for what's coming and silver up as well. So we're in there with you guys. Take care. See you next week.